Recording progress.
So welcome to tonight's webinar. The webinar is going to comprise of two elements. I'm going to talk a little bit about your options after your AAT studies are completed, which actually is very, very soon. And then we're going to spend a little bit of time on a technical element of the level 4 synoptic. So I'm going to go through a task that really comes from the management accounting decision and control syllabus, and it's an area that gets examined or assessed rather quite frequently in your professional synoptic. So we're going to look at activity-based costing and see if we can tackle one of those. My details are on the next slide. Pick them over. So my name's Ashley. I am head of PQ at First Intuition Maidstone. I'm happy at any point for you to contact me following this evening. If you've got any questions on further studies, any technical support or anything like that that you might need, then email me, ashleybean@fi.co.uk, and I will be happy to help. So what we're going to do before we have a look at the technical element is I'm just going to talk a little bit about what options you have should you be considering taking your accountancy studies any further. So at First Intuition, we deliver two courses that would build upon what you have seen at level 4, and they are the ACCA and the ICAW. So I'll spend a little bit of time talking about those. Have a very brief overview before talking to you a little bit about the structure of the exams, what level 4 will give you in terms of exemptions as well, and yeah, kind of where you would enter those qualifications if they are something that you're interested in. So as I mentioned, there are a couple of options. The first one is to build upon the AAT studies and your qualification by moving into the ACCA. And the ACCA qualification is quite broad. So it will include aspects, modern aspects of digital data analysis, that kind of thing, technology, and so on. But as I mentioned, its broadness means that it will cover both management accounting and financial accounting in quite some detail. So a well-rounded qualification and something that you can use throughout your career, build upon, and also something that generally makes you quite attractive in the market because it's a prestigious qualification that is versatile. There are choices with the ACCA, so you have the option to attempt particular units based upon your career path, based upon your preferences. So there's some flexibility there. It's a global qualification, so people attempt ACCA exams all around the world, and so it is renowned internationally as well. And then in addition to the exams, the exam requirement, you also have to demonstrate, as you can see there, practical experience requirements as well, or there's a practical experience requirement, which requires you to, as you can see, have 3 relevant years of working experience. Okay, so there are some extra modules in addition to the exams that you need to complete to obtain membership. So the ACCA syllabus, without getting too involved, you can see kind of builds up, hence the illustration here. Now, if you look at the experience section there, so after the foundations, you've got applied knowledge. Now, with applied knowledge, these are the foundation elements, the kind of, I said basics, not really a good word to use, but the kind of core elements, if you like, that you'll then build upon with the next level. And actually, if you obtain your AAT membership and you complete your exam, your assessment, then you will be exempt from your applied knowledge units. So as an ACCA member, as an AAT member, you'd be moving into applied skills, and you would complete those applied skills units. So corporate and business law, performance management, taxation, financial reporting, audit and assurance, and financial management. Now, generally, both, I suppose, within FI and amongst, I suppose, the students more widely, those units are either attempted every 6 months, and it's quite common practice at FI for students to do 2 at a time. So you'd do 2 units up to, say, June, and then 2 units up to December. Or you might get some students, because the exams do run quarterly, that might either chop and change, run 1 every quarter. It can be run at your own pace, which obviously makes it quite adaptable too. Having completed the applied skills element, you could then move on to the strategic professional, and then at that level you would have 4 exams. So there are 2 compulsory units. You've got strategic business leader, and then you've got strategic business and reporting. But you can then see that there are 4 units of which you would need to pick 2. So I suppose based upon your background, based upon maybe what you enjoyed more or what you felt more competent at the applied skills level, you'll see that they take some of those applied skills units and go further in that they're advanced. So for instance, if you like performance management, you could then go in and complete advanced performance management and so on. So that's how the exams work. In addition to that, you will see towards the end there, under congratulations, there are other qualifications you can gain as you go along. So you can actually gain a degree whilst completing your studies. Probably a good idea to complete your studies first and then go and complete the degree. But one thing that we run at First Intuition as well is the Oxford Brookes programme. So in addition to your applied skills units, you would complete a report, and having completed that report, you could gain a degree in applied accounting. So yeah, there are lots of options with the ACCA. It's quite flexible. It may be applied to your background, as you can see with your optional units. And as I've mentioned already, it's well-rounded in that you can see from that list, it covers a vast range of units. We also have quite a few students who wish to build upon AAT by going in and completing the ICAW qualification. Now, the ICAW, as you can see on that list actually at the bottom there, tends to be more geared towards accountants in practice. So the vast majority of our ICAW students do work in an accountancy practice. But from the students I've seen qualify over the years, they move into all manner of roles. You know, they often move out of practice into industry-based roles and so on. So it's not restrictive in any way. It's just that it is probably more recognized in a practice environment, within an accountancy practice. You can see as well there that you have to complete, well, if you're going to complete the ICAW qualification, you must work for an authorized employer, and there needs to be a formal training agreement. You're also fast-tracked. If you complete the AAT qualification, as I'll show you in a minute, you get exemptions, and actually more exemptions than you would get with the ACCA. So there are, as you can see, 15 exams. You do need to demonstrate 450 days of practical work experience, which, to be honest with you, would come quite naturally if you're in an accounting role. So really, it's the exams that would be the biggest challenge to obtain the qualification. And the way the qualification works with the ICAW, as you can see, is that there are 3 levels. You've got the certificate level, the professional level, and the advanced level. And as the previous slide said, you can gain up to 5 exemptions having completed the AAT qualification. This does depend upon the units that you decided to take with the AAT. So You may, as you can see, gain exemptions across the board. It might depend and so on. But yeah, depending on the units that you take, particular exemptions can be gained. You would then have to complete all of the papers at the professional level. So you can see you've got a series of units there. So financial accounting, business planning, and there are a few variations of business planning. The one that our students take is business planning tax, your business strategy, audit assurance, tax compliance, and financial management. And then you go through to the advanced stage, which again takes some of those professional level units further, culminating in the case study exam to obtain overall membership. So yeah, in terms of exams, not hugely different. They generally cover very, very similar themes, but worth thinking about your options. If it is something that interests you, if you do want to go on to further studies, I'm happy to answer any more questions that you might have. But yeah, ensure that you do think carefully about which one you want to go down and which one might suit you, your background, and so on. All right. Any questions at all on study options after level 4? Okay, no worries. Well, if you do have them, if you think of them as we go through, fire away in the chat and I'm happy to pick them up as we go. So what we're going to turn our attention to now then is the technical element of the webinar, in that we're going to have a look at some revision for your upcoming synoptic assessment. And the one that I've picked, the one that we've picked, is one of the tasks that students tend to struggle on more than really with the others. And we're going to look at some themes of management, accounting, decision and control. Under the new syllabus, this would be applied management accounting, but this theme, or these themes that we're about to see, sit within both of those units and come through to the professional synoptic. And historically, this has been one of the weaker areas. You see it as well. If you get the chance to read the examiner's report on the AAT website, then you will see there that there are a few comments, if you like, on how task 4 and task 2, to be honest with you, how they challenge students more than other tasks. All right, so generally it's got one of the lowest pass rates. Okay, so let's have a look then. So what I've done is I've picked out a task from one of our mock assessments. I'm going to go through it methodically, and then I will answer it as I go, picking up on the key points. If you do have any questions as we go, then, as I said, please do jump in. I'm happy to help. And then what I'll do, having completed the numbers, is I will devise a kind of written answer to that element. You're aware, of course, that with the professional synoptic, there is a written element. There are going to be written tasks. And again, in addition to the fact that task 4 is difficult from a technical point of view, I'm fully aware of the fact that students do struggle with the written parts of tasks. All right, so I'm happy to help with that. I have also got further resources on how you can improve your written tasks and things like that. So I ran a webinar last year which went through improving the quality of your written answers. That is available on the FI blogs page, but I will put the link to that in the chat at some point. All right. Anyway, we've got AEM then. So obviously you're aware of the fact that you've got your synoptic based upon this organization. And this task that I'm going to run through is about activity-based costing. So I've picked this because I know, having taught this in the past, that this is an area that people struggle with. So we're going to work through the information, and you'll see that then over the page, we've got to complete these numbers using activity-based costing principles. They've given us a pick list, and then also to explain the issues in both the current approach, the new ABC approach, and the impact, before then discussing 2 benefits of using activity-based costing. All right. So let's have a look. So as it says, following a budget meeting between the senior management team, AEM are reviewing the system they use to allocate head office costs to showrooms. At present, all they do is allocate costs based on the number of employees in each showroom. Okay. And there's a problem with that, as you can see, is in that it says this means that the online sales division of the business not receive or do not receive a share of these costs. The online sales are all included in head office costs. So effectively, the costs haven't been split out appropriately. And so what then happens is you're told the following. You're given a head office overheads in total of £2,098,750. And then you've further got some information here for one of the showrooms. So what they've done is that within head office overheads, this figure here, they've said, oh yes, one of the showrooms has the following overheads attributable to it. And you might remember that with activity-based costing, the overall overhead is split into cost pools. And these, as you can see here, are the 4 cost pools. Basically, they're categories of overheads. Okay. So we're given those, and in a minute, we're going to transfer those to our answer. Okay, or actually, no, we're not. We're going to use those as part of our working because they are the starting point. Okay. These overhead cost. They will be our starting point. Let's have a look at the rest of the information before we start using them, though. So what you're then told is a little bit about each of these. So you can see you've got order costs. They then talk a little bit about delivery costs. There's information on website costs. And then over the page, they tell you a little bit about finance and admin. Okay. And the reason this is useful is that at the moment we've just got an overhead. What we need to be able to do is work out effectively the cost that's absorbed by the showrooms. They've just given you the cost pools, and what we've got to do is work out which costs, which overheads are attributable to this particular showroom. So what we're told then, if we deal with order costs first, what we're told is that the order costs are incurred, the ordering of new vehicles from manufacturers to meet customer requirements. This is key. 1 order line is needed per customer order. And then these are all processed showrooms on a weekly basis. Okay. You're then told, as you complete the paragraph, the internal processes will follow the orders through the manufacturing process, provide information to the showroom on expected delivery dates. Any used cars purchased by head office will have order costs included. Okay. So what you have are ordering costs of 780,000. And you're then told that the way these work is that there is 1 order line per customer order. And what we need to find is what's driven this 780,000. Remember that activity-based costing looks at the overhead and it says, well, what has driven that particular overhead? You know, what's pushed that cost up, the true cost driver? We're now fairly confident, looking at that paragraph, that it's got something to do with the orders. The orders drive the ordering costs, unsurprisingly. But let's just deal with this one first, so we can get into the motions of it, rather than worrying about them all at once. So I'm going to come back to all of this in a minute. What you are given at the top of page 12 are also the activity numbers. So you're told, as you can see, that there are 200 vehicle deliveries, 640 customer orders. There are 15 showrooms, 140 employees, and then £32.2 million in sales made by the showrooms. And as I said, I'm going to worry about each one in turn. So if I have over here £780,000 worth of ordering costs as an overhead, what I need to do is determine how that has been arrived at. You know, what's driven that? And given the fact that they've now told me, as you can see here, there are 640 customer orders, I should be fairly confident that that figure of 780,000 is driven by those orders, because we're told as much in the material. So what I would do, I'll write the workings over here on the left, is first of all, using the pick list. As you can see down here, they want us to take the answer from pick list 1. So in the assessment, this would be multiple choice. You'd click on a box here and it would give you these options. And I should be okay with that. I mean, from that list then, which one would we select? Do you think? Careful, not the second one. I don't know if you, yeah, that's it. The third one, per customer order. Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll try and fit that in here. Thing you're doing is you're working out, or rather not even working out, but identifying what the cost driver is. Okay. And what we're then going to do is we're going to work out, as you can see here, the overhead absorption rate. This is a key term with management accounting, something that you would have seen quite frequently when you did your management accounting papers. The overhead absorption rate is calculated by taking the overhead and dividing it by the appropriate level of activity. So we now know, coming back to our order costs, you anyway, that the order cost was 780,000. So I would take that 780,000. That's the top line, really, isn't it? That's my overhead. And I'm going to divide it by the appropriate level of activity, which you've just told me is customer orders. So from above, as I've highlighted, we know that what drives that overhead are the customer orders. Okay. And if you take the 780,000, divide it by the customer orders, then your overhead absorption rate that sits in here would be 1,218.75. Okay. Note that here, although it divides anyway, enter your figures to 2 decimal places, apart from the website costs that it wants you to do to 3 decimals. Okay. No commas and pound signs. Are we okay with that? Any questions at that point? So what I now know then is that every time an order is placed, we're going to recognize a cost of 1,218.75. But what you have to be careful of with ABC is that you've worked out the overhead absorption rate for all activity. So these are your total order costs. And this down here is your total number of orders. If we now know it's 1,218 per order, we need to identify how many orders that relates to for our showroom. Effectively, what we're doing here, you might remember the term, is we're absorbing the overhead. Before we can do that in the final column, we need to identify what activity has taken place in showroom 1. So looking at the list again, it asks us to select from pick list 2. You've told me it was per customer order. So we're going to multiply it by the fact that in showroom 1, there are 36. Well, there will be 36 orders. Result. If it's £1,218.75 per order, and there are 36 orders in showroom 1, multiplying the two together, we give you £43,875. And it's a similar approach as we go through. We're going to, as you can see, we're going to identify the driver. We will work out the overhead absorption rate. We will identify from pick list 2 down here the activity, and that will give us the opportunity to identify the absorbed cost in showroom 1. Okay, so let's come back and let's look at delivery costs. On all inventory received of new and used cars, special transportation is required to ensure that they received in perfect condition. Fine. Okay. You're then told, as you can see, there are issues and so on, and that delivery costs include the cost to transfer from head office. But the bit that we should really be mindful of here is where it says a batch of vehicles will be delivered to each showroom to keep costs to a minimum. So what you don't do is deliver each car. There's not a delivery cost per unit. When the cars are delivered, they come in batches of 200. Therefore, the cost driver is not a unit, it's not a car, it's a batch. So over the page, you can see the activity number is 200 vehicle deliveries. All right. But that's not one of your options down here. You've got to be really, really careful. So your delivery cost will be driven by your batches. So your cost driver activity is per batch. Now, just be careful, because as you can see, this tells you there were 200 vehicle deliveries for the showrooms. Okay, so what that means is, without saying it outright, there were 200 batches delivered. It's not a 200 vehicle delivery, which is horrible because they told you that they come in 200. It's that there were 200 arrivals for 200 batches. Okay. As a result, our overhead absorption rate, which I'll try and put, say, over here, is going to be our total delivery costs of 512,000 divided by the number of deliveries, of which there were 200. You take your 512,000, you would divide by the fact that there are going to be 200 deliveries. 112,000 over the 200 batches delivered gives you 2,560 per delivery. And what we're then going to do, of course, is we're going to absorb it. So we then look at showroom one activity. Remember, there are a list of options here. Quite nicely laid out for us, this, isn't it? You can see there are 12 batches for showroom one. The result, then, you're going to multiply 2,560 by the 12 batches. And that's going to give you 30,720. You've then got website costs. Okay. So coming back, let's look at what they tell us here. We're told website costs are a mixture of marketing costs, costs of the online promotion and sales function, and information about each showroom location and contact details, as well as keeping up to date. Now, you can quite clearly see that these costs are related to sales. Yeah, so the website costs are all about, as you can see, promotion, marketing, sales. And so if you come through to the potential activities, the drivers, the most appropriate one from that list would be the amount of revenue that the showrooms have made. Okay. Because ultimately, the more revenue that's being made, the higher the promotion and sales costs, because there's increased activity, and as a result, website costs are likely to be going up. So an appropriate driver for sales costs is sales. All right. So let's look back at the overhead. The overhead that we have is £483,000 of website costs. What I didn't do is slot the driver in, which would be per of revenue, as I mentioned. Putting out a bit of a space, I think out of space here a bit. Yeah. So the calculation for the overhead absorption rate, again, is always your overhead divided by your appropriate level of activity. So I'm going to take the 483,000 and I'm going to divide it by the 32,200,000. Now, this is the one I believe that they've asked me to round to 3 decimal places. That's hardly surprising. And so when you calculate that, it comes out at 0.015. What's that, 1.5 pence per pound? Anyway, that's all very well. There's our overhead absorption rate. We're going to multiply then that by the level of activity. And the level of activity is the pounds of revenue, you can see down here, of which there were 1.5 million. So you're going to multiply that. .015 times 1,500,000. I have been told, slap on the wrist, don't use commas or signs. So let me follow the instructions. And so 0.015 times 1,500,000 is 22,500. And then finally, we've got finance and admin. Okay. And so coming back and looking at this, so the information for this is at the top of page 12. It says finance and admin costs include all other head office costs. Thanks very much. The second sentence that really helps us. It's considered each showroom places equal demand on these services from head office. In other words, the showrooms each give rise to the costs, so that it's a showroom which drives the finance and admin costs. So the cost driver is simply going to be per showroom, not the number of employees, which was the other option. Okay. So to work out the overhead absorption rate, let's go over here. And to work out this overhead absorption rate, we're going to do what we've done all along now, and we're going to take the overall overhead, which is 326,250. And we're going to divide that by the number of showrooms across the business, which there are 15. Okay. 326,250 across 15 showrooms is £21,750. Technically, I suppose, the 2 decimal places. And so basically, each showroom incurs finance and admin costs of 21,750. This bit's not a trick. We are doing this for one showroom. So it is a case, quite simply, of multiplying it by 1. So rather nicely, 3,750. And then it appears that were this to be the assessment, the software and the assessment, this would auto sum. But adding that up, I won't use a comma, although it would do it for me, I suppose. Your total there would be £118,845. But yeah, relatively involved question there from a calculative point of view on activity-based costing. And something that, as I've mentioned already, if you look at the examiner's report, the AAT examiner's report, it has been mentioned in the past that this has troubled people. I think part of the reason for that is that it's not covered in huge detail in decision and control. I mean, it's there, but it's not particularly core. But what we have found is that with professional Synoptic, it's tested quite readily. So it is something that you want to make sure you're comfortable with in case this type of thing appears in task 4, but potentially task 2 as well, because they're your management accounting style tasks in the Synoptic. Okay, so that's the calculation element. What they also appear to be dedicating marks for here, as I mentioned at the beginning, is just a mark for issues with the current approach and the new ABC approach. And then the impact, I mean, that's a lot to do for a mark, but I'll disregard the mark allocation and try and answer each aspect of that question. And then over the page, 2 benefits of using activity-based costing. Okay. So let's just hark back to what they told us at the beginning. And they told us at the beginning that basically what they are currently doing is to take the costs and divide it by the number of employees in each showroom. Okay. And that's problematic for a number of reasons, really. And you can point really to any of this information here as to why it's an issue. For example, I don't know, the number of employees, there's a number of people that work in a showroom does not have any correlation with the amount of deliveries. And so it's a poor cost driver. So what I would say to start with, if I were going to try to answer each aspect of this, let me talk about the issues, first of all, with the current approach. I'll do it in 3. As I said, you wouldn't have to do this much for the mark, but it's good practice nonetheless. So I would say something along the lines of the issue with the current approach is that some overheads well, you can see none of them are driven by the number of employees. But some of the overheads are not driven by as I've said there, the issue with the current approach is that overheads are not driven by the number of employees, which leads to the cost being inaccurate. In essence, you could have one showroom with 10 people and another showroom with 1 person, and the showroom with 10 people would get 10 times the overheads, which isn't the right way to go about it, because it's not, as I've mentioned already, the number of staff that push up some of these costs. So that's my issue with the current approach. The new approach looks better, don't get me wrong. It does look better. An issue related to the current approach could be, for example, well, rather than me tell you, can anybody think of a reason? It's tricky. But if I've just done what I've done here, is there any reason you might think of that doesn't render this approach perfect? It's an improvement, as I've said, but it's not perfect. Tricky question. Okay, let me help. Oh, this is a leading question. Is it fair that every single showroom pays the same amount, or has attributed to it, if you like, the same amount of finance costs and admin costs? Well, the answer to that is probably no, because I doubt that every single showroom has a completely equal share of salaries of, say, I don't know, printing costs, could be heating costs. I don't know what sits in admin, but it's incredibly unlikely that there's a completely even split. Some showrooms are going to be a lot bigger than others. Some showrooms will have more staff and therefore will be paying more salaries. So although I'm happier with this approach, it's still not perfect. And I would make that clear. Okay, so initially, current approach is that some of the methods are still not entirely accurate. For example, finance administration costs. Not allocated there. What I might want to do, probably not for a mark, but let's disregard that and do a proper answer. What I might want to do is further explain that. So I don't like the fact that they're done like they are. It's not fair. For instance, it is unlikely each showroom be occurring Yeah, it's unlikely that salaries, as an example, would be completely evenly split across every single showroom. And as a result, the way that it's done, let's just divide it by showrooms, I don't think is particularly accurate. So effectively what I've done there is done that. And then if I'm going to relate it back to this, it talks about the impacts that this could have. I can really talk, I've obviously talked about 2 floors. I can talk about the effect of those 2 floors by saying an inaccurate method of absorption can lead to demotivation. Ask me what the impact would be. Let's say loss of motivation. Because feel that their performance target being undermined by what we can talk about overstated overheads, I suppose, in certain cases. Now, to be honest with you, for the 3 requirements there, you might come to expect more than the mark. I suppose even if it was for a mark, I'd make sure I covered all 3 bases. But with a requirement like that, they're asking you to do 3 things. I'd imagine there would probably be 3 marks of credit. But a tip for the assessment is to break the requirement down. Don't just run straight in and think, well, that's what they're asking me to do. With the synoptic, there's nearly always more than one task, one element to the requirement. So just make sure that you are addressing all of it. It's key. Okay. All right, and then over to part C then. Explain 2 benefits of using an activity-based costing approach. Can any of you think then of a benefit to what I've been doing there? Why is the method that I've been using better than the current method? I think so. Reason why you think it's a good thing? Okay, well, one method, or rather one benefit to the method, is that it's more thorough, isn't it? Rather than just dividing my overhead by number of staff and saying job done, what I've done is I've looked at each and every cost pool, or a number of cost pools, and I've said, well, rather than just saying the entire overhead is driven by staff, I've said that the overhead is made up of different things, i.e. 4 pools, and each pool is driven by something different. Okay, so I suppose I could build on Lucy's there to start with, and one benefit of the activity-based costing approach that overheads are apportionable fairly, as you've rightly said. This leads to more accurate costs being recorded. Yeah, so by splitting the overheads on a more appropriate basis, you've now got more accurate costs attributed to, say, to showroom one. Okay. And yeah, what Caroline said there is a good one as well. It's easier to see where high levels of costs are and what causes this. So if I maybe wrap that up in a more generic sense, you're absolutely right. But basically, it gives us more accurate figures and therefore lead accurate decision making. Yes, so as you said, we can see where the high levels of costs are and the causes, and as a result of that, we might be able to make better decisions. Okay, so building in your point, activity-based costing gives a clearer reflection drivers provide more, really want to again, let's go for provide more clarity on the causes. I mean, that in its own right is an advantage, to be honest with you. So I would only want 2, by the way. It asked me for 2. It's 2 marks. It's quite clear that the marks are being split of 1 for each benefit. But an alternative would be what I've just said. I think you could drag it out and say the increased, the improved accuracy to result in better decision making. As managers have more reliable information. Okay. Only pick 2. There are more, but only pick 2 of those, and you've got your marks. All right. You'll note that what I'm trying to do is communicate professionally. You'll know that what I'm trying to do is write in 4 sentences. I'm trying not to use jargon. I'm trying not to talk, in short form or anything like that. Imagine that when you're in this assessment, you're writing, say, to a manager, client. You put yourself in the shoes of a professional individual, and therefore you have to make sure that your answers are presented as such. As I've mentioned, there is another webinar on the FI Hub that includes information on professional writing skills. I will put that link in the chat, and you can use those to your advantage. So there are other ones on there as well, actually, from previous synoptic sittings. as I move down here, that will be relevant to you. So there's another decision control one, there's a budgeting one here, there's a financial statements one, and so on. I'm just going to put that link in there now so that you can have a look at that. You've also got lots of other resources on YouTube and so on. But yeah, certainly important to make sure that you are presenting your answers in a professional manner. Okay. Any questions at all on anything there? Very, very good example of how a challenging aspect of decision and control can be assessed in a synoptic. Yeah. Okay, well, if there are no questions, I hope you found it useful. Thank you very much for your time. Please stick around if you've got any specific questions, and I'm happy to help. Other than that, if you are going to make a move, best of luck for your synoptic, and hopefully we'll see you for one of your next qualifications, ACCA or ICAW. Thanks very much.